The United States government, and everybody crazy, politicians are all corrupt and it's all the same. And it's all like, if this system doesn't work, right? It's like the jury system. Nobody wants to serve in jury. Great. Okay. If we don't have a jury system with good jurors, like that is the fundamental hallmark to justice in our country. Like you should want to help and participate in that. And it's the same thing with our policy and political system. And so whether it's think tanks, right, or other organizations, it's really important. And I view that as, in my own view, as a huge act of giving. I'm certainly not, getting a pecuniary item, and it doesn't benefit me other than the context of me being an American. And I just think it's so important. Like we take this, I think so many people take democracy and freedom for granted. It is not free, and it is not. And the system has to work. And I think people are seeing it now like, oh, this is scary. And it's like, yeah, so let's join together and help improve this thing.
Michael Levy, how you doing today, bud?
Terrific to see you, Conrad. I'm doing well. Good day.
That's good.
Beautiful out here today.
It is nice. The last month has been really incredible here in Dallas.
Fabulous days.
It has been good, but I think the end is near, my friend. I think we're starting to see the 90s next week. So
don't say that. Don't say that.
I know. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come meet with me today. I always like to tell folks a little bit about how we got connected.
Okay.
And people ask me all the time, Michael, like, what do I get out of LinkedIn, and social media and so on and so forth. And I tell people all the time, like, it's changed my life and it's opened a lot of doors for me. And one of those doors that's opened for me is getting to know you, and it all started with, you sent me a message on LinkedIn about one of my posts, and I don't remember all the details of it, but we started exchanging some emails, and ultimately I was like, man, I'd love to grab lunch or coffee with you, and that's kind of how it started.
I'd forgotten that, but yeah.
Really?
Well, I've forgotten that, but
Yeah.
I remember. I don't remember the post, but I definitely remember sending you that message.
Yes.
And, the truth is we probably would have met at some point either way through a mutual friend, Jack Fraker. But,
for sure.
But that is how we met, undoubtedly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then, we had lunch and, we hit it off. We had a lot of, it's so funny is like, you're a New York City guy from the biggest metropolis in all of of North America, just about, other than Mexico City. Yeah. But, and I'm from this small town in Deep South Texas. And I went into that lunch that day going, man, what am I going to have in common with this guy? Right. And you couldn't have come across as any nicer. We created bonds. We had similarities. And that was just really cool. And then obviously Jack Fraker, our very good mutual friend, it just went off really well.
Yeah.
And we've stayed in touch and became what I would consider friends today. It's awesome.
Fabulous, man.
Yeah, man. So that's how we got started. And before we dive into all things kind of finance and commercial real estate, I'd love to tell the audience a little bit about kind of your upbringing and kind of how that shaped you to the person you are today. So tell us a little bit about Michael Levy, where you came from, where you grew up, and all that good stuff.
No problem if people are interested. So my mom and dad came from different worlds. My dad's family was an immigrant family from Russia into Brooklyn, New York.
Yep.
And my mom's family were coal miners in Appalachia that been in the country from Scotland and England and been in the country for, a couple hundred years.
Okay.
And then moved up into Ohio right after World War II and we're both in the manufacturing and the farming culture and country.
Right.
And my mom grew up in a small town, and when she did go to college, and when she got out of college with the typical story, $8 in her pocket, and stayed at the Barbizon Hotel in New York City and moved to New York to get a job. And my dad and mom met on the job. So the first thing is just very different backgrounds from my parents. So if you're asking who I am, I'm shaped by those two influences. But I'm more shaped by my dad's influence because the family was around us in Brooklyn and New York, and a typical, immigrant, the family who came with nothing and created businesses. And I grew up in Nassau County in Long Island, so I didn't grow up in Brooklyn. My dad moved us out, and we were, I'd say a middle to upper middle class background in public schools, and I had a great upbringing, interesting parents, no significant adversity that shaped me, and and then I was
a hardworking family,
definitely, talented. My mom is very talented. My dad was a great guy, and did the best they could, and sometimes just business wise things were bad. His business went bankrupt, and all sorts of stuff, but not the kind of adversity anybody. There's no story to my adversity growing up,
right?
And I was a good student. Like a lot of young kids, certainly never applied myself the way that I should have. But,
I think we all are like that.
Right? I mean, just, not all. We had some friends who did. But, school came pretty easy, and, life, I was, capable guy and had friends and did all the normal things that one would do.
Did you play sports growing up?
Yeah, but never. I guess what happened when I became a teenager, I think I got more interested in the other parts of being a teenager, friends and hanging out and cars ultimately. And, so I didn't go down the path of the discipline and that, I regret a number of things. That's one of the things, and not applying myself well enough, perhaps not having the discipline I should have had, not taking, some of the sports I had skills at and running with them. But I didn't, and I learned other things. Yeah. And I had a really eclectic group of friends. I still do, from all walks of life. From every angle, every socioeconomic group, every ethnic group. I grew up with a really diverse group of people in my life. Yeah. And
which is great.
We lived in a town, it was called Port Washington, and literally the school system in Port Washington had, people represented truly from the housing projects all the way up to the, multi-million-dollar homes on the water. And and all the ethnic groups that go along in that spectrum of homes. And so that was our school, and that was my culture. So that shaped me a lot. If you're trying to get to what shaped me, that multiplicity of cultures and the highly differentiated, economic strata of all of my friends, shaped me in ways that benefit me, have benefited me my whole life.
What did you want to be when you were a kid? When you started thinking about careers? Did you want to be a Wall Street guy?
No, I didn't even know what that meant. My mother had become, and she spent really a large chunk of her life, a fine artist. Abstract impressionist painter, and I had some really good art skills. And my first year in college, I went to college for design.
Wow.
I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I didn't understand career paths. I didn't, I knew I didn't want to be poor. But I really liked art. I was skilled, and I had a artistic mind, and I had some training in it. And so I applied to a bunch of different schools, and schools like the Rhode Island School of Design. I mean, truly design schools.
Right.
I took a middle ground in my first year of college. I went to Drexel University, and I took a design major it wasn't completely fine art, but it has nothing to do with business, and it wasn't architecture. It was somewhere in between. Yeah. And then in my first semester, it was a trimester. My first trimester, I decided that I really didn't want to be old and broke. And I met an individual who was impressive to me, who called himself an international banker. And I said, that's what I want to be. So I, having no idea what an international banker meant, I got a 4.0 my first trimester, and I applied to a bunch of schools that had good business programs. And NYU accepted me.
Yeah.
And so I transferred while I was director to the business school, I think my third trimester. And then I went into NYU's Stern School of Business, and I finished college in Manhattan, living in an apartment with some friends, and living a New York City urban life as a 19-year-old kid was a lot of fun.
I bet it was. I bet it was.
A lot of fun. So,
what pushed you to then go to law school? Because you went to law school after that, right?
Fear. I got out of undergrad, and a buddy of mine started a small business together, and it was fun. It was hard, and I realized really quickly how little I knew. And I was always fearful. Remember I said it earlier about being old and broke? And so I was deciding, okay, more education is a good thing because, I'm fearful and it'll help secure, give me more insurance. And it was, do I get an MBA or a law degree? And I figured an MBA would be very similar to the experience I had undergrad. And if I was a lawyer, I could always earn a living, practicing law. So, but I was broke and my parents had no means to help me, and so I went to law school at night. I got a job as a legal assistant during the day, one subway stop away from Brooklyn Law, and I went to law school at night and spent 4 years going through that program and got done.
Wow. I love that.
Well,
I mean,
it's my story, but
it's
everybody's
great.
got a story.
I thought law was going to be a path for me too, and it was funny. It's just a great, to me, it's like a parachute, right? Like you could always fall back on law if you needed to, if that was the path you wanted to go down.
If you listen to my story and you say, okay, why I did it in fear and all those things are true. But it was an amazing experience. It shaped my mind. It built discipline.
Yeah.
You want to talk about discipline? You work a full-time job and go to law school at night. You learn how to focus. You learn... And just the command and the ability to articulate your thoughts, and what an amazing experience! I loved every moment of it. I even loved taking the bar exam. Literally, I had a great experience with a bunch of friends studying for the bar exam. So I had nothing but a wonderful experience, wonderful professors who caused me to think in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And I would have absolutely worked in the legal field. But the lawyers I worked for during the day as a legal assistant kept telling me, you don't want to do this for a living. The guys on the business side make more money and have more fun.
Right.
And I worked for a securities firm in the legal department.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, and how do I get a job on the business side? And luckily,
isn't it funny? Every real estate attorney tells me the same thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you guys have all the fun, you make all the money, and we just push paper all day long, you know?
I guess the grass is always greener.
Yeah, you're right.
So I, luckily, the guy who ran the legal department knew the guy who ran the investment banking department. And, got me an interview, and next thing I know, they gave me a job in the investment bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it started at Prudential, right?
Yeah, Prudential Securities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me,
that's where I worked as legal assistant. So I had
you were there,
4 years, and then I spent 2 more years there in the investment bank.
Got it. Yeah. And then you switched over. You were at Salomon Brothers after that. So let's talk about the journey all the way from Wall Street to Y'all Street. Right?
Wow. I'll come back to a story on y'all in a minute. I worked at Prue Securities in investment banking, and they dropped me in the real estate group. This is 1994, and for those readers who are old enough, by 1994, Wall Street was bailing out Main Street from the S&L crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The modern REIT era had arrived. And so I'm a young person at a firm. Prudential Securities had huge flow in IPOs and M&A transactions for the public REITs. And so as a young guy working on literally, a transaction a week, just feeding you knowledge and reps. And it was an amazing experience. And I worked for people. But in the world of investment banking, Prudential Securities was, let's just call it a tier 2 investment bank. And you understood in that business that tiering kind of matters from a career perspective. And at that time, while Salomon Brothers was not the luster it was prior to the Treasury scandal in 91. Its brand and its firm was well intact. So I joined Solomon Brothers, and I was right. They were literally better. I mean, at their jobs than on aggregate. Even though I worked with wonderful people, they were just really good at what they did.
Right.
And 9 months later, they got bought by Smith Barney, and I was like, okay, this is okay. I'm not sure if this is good for me. And then I'm making the months up, but 9 months later, they got bought by Citigroup. And I was going into the office right after the transaction was announced, and in the lobby, they're trying to sell me a checking account. And I was like, this is not the direction I wanted to go in.
Right.
And, I wanted to work for the best investment bank that in the market and work on the most complicated, sophisticated, challenging projects. And I was like, this is moving me in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And so I used that as an opportunity to interact with Morgan Stanley.
Yep.
And after a lengthy interview process, and given my background, a very untraditional background back in those days, vis-a-vis the people who worked in that career, they provided an opportunity for me to join them in 1998. And I spent 18 years there.
Wow.
And then, and I worked in real estate I did other things, but most of those years. And then in 2008, in the middle of the financial crisis, I moved from investment banking to the investment management division, where I started to focus exclusively on that side of the business, and originally real estate for a number of years, and then illiquid alternatives that would include things like infrastructure and private equity.
Right.
And then I finished my career focusing on the broader equity, fixed income, investment management division.
Yep.
And then I left after 18 years.
And let's talk about that journey, because that's why you're here today, and that's why we're sitting here. How did you land with Harlan Crowe? How did that process come together?
When you work on a client basis at a firm like Morgan Stanley, et cetera, you meet lots of people, and you kind of get known amongst the recruiter community. People know you. It's just it's just the nature of the platform that you're on. So I knew the various recruiters out there, and had spoken to people. I'd always managed my career and knew where I stood. And I got a phone call from one of the large recruiting firms saying, explaining the opportunity and saying to me, "Would you be interested in meeting Harlan?"
Yeah.
And, I had no connectivity to the organization. Footnote: go back to Prudential Securities, 1994. One of the absolute first transactions I worked on was something that came out of Crowe.
Interesting.
Just history, no relationship. And so we met in the end of 2014. I had come to Dallas probably 30 times before then for business. I, kind of knew the market. We had invested some properties down here.
Yep.
But I came down and I pulled up to this building called Old Parkland, and I was like, this is not what I expected in Dallas, Texas. And so, and then I had the most wonderful couple-hour discussion with Harlan, who's just an amazing person, and we talked off and on for a long time.
Sure. How long was that courtship?
Well, it was almost 2 years, but that's not fair. I would say to you that it was really a 6-month back and forth, and then I had an opportunity. I got a phone call from Morgan Stanley to take on a big division of the firm in the spring of 2015, and I couldn't say no. And Harlan and I weren't done.
Yeah, right.
And I called Harlan and I said, I was on spring break, and I got a phone call from the number 2 guy at Morgan Stanley who said, hey, listen, we want to make this change. It's a great opportunity for you. This is your shot. Take your time with your family. This is on a Thursday. Take your time, but we want to announce it on Monday. So I knew right then on the phone call, I was like, I got to go do this. So I effectively took my hat out of the ring for a year. And then I got a phone call from one of the senior people at Crowe that I'd gotten to know, who had asked me what was I doing? How was life? What was going on? Because they had not landed on their decision. And the truth of the matter is that really big job I got and all the things that got along with it, I got closer to the wick of the flame of the firm, and what I saw became far less interesting to me than what I thought I might see.
Interesting.
And so the attraction was less, pulled at me less. And I'd always, since I stopped discussions with them, I'd always that year reflected on the road I didn't take and wondered,
Yeah.
I was like, what if I had taken that? What if I had taken that? And then I get this phone call at a time when the wick of the flame was less attractive to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to talk again. That would be fabulous. And very quickly thereafter, my wife and I flew down. We spent some time, got to meet the family, and made the decision quickly. And and then
now it's been a 7.5 year ride.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Well, yeah. It's 8 years ago I left Morgan. And I had, a little bit of time off, which was great.
Yeah.
Great time.
Right.
And then I came down at the end of 2016.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, and it's interesting, right? You got, Harlan's dad is obviously Trammell Crowe, who everybody knows.
Yep.
And had an incredibly successful track record as a developer. And Harlan was, interested in really placing and growing capital to do more development type opportunities. And so tell me a little bit about, when you guys were talking, what was his and your vision, and kind of how has that changed over the last 7 years or so?
Look, I don't want to speak for Harlan by any means, so I can only give you my impression. Look, there were very little part of the relationship that we developed through this period of time before I joined the company was about my vision for strategy. It was much more about the humanity of all of us and our culture and our fit. I mean, on paper, look at me on paper, right?
Right.
New York, Jewish, Wall Street, scrappy, that fits, right? That doesn't fit on paper, but the humanity of it all, the people, the culture, who I am, that's where the time was spent. I had lots of experiences, and he knew, and they all knew. I mean, I met many people at the company. They knew all my background. They knew everything I worked on.
Yep.
I had, a pretty good handle on what the company did, but there was very little, okay, Michael, you have this vision. Let's go execute on it.
Yeah.
That was not at all how I joined the firm.
Yeah.
How I joined the firm was I spent a year without a title, without anybody reporting to me, learning. And remember, I was never in the development business.
Yep. Right.
I mean, so I went all around the country. I learned. I spent time with the construction team. I mean, I learned, and I developed relationships with people without being in a position to have to make decisions and get to know people and get to, build trust. You meet somebody the first time, and then the second time and the third time, and you're talking about life and families, and you build a relationship.
Sure.
So, and during that period of time, I was learning and developing my own ideas. And then a year later, when I assumed responsibility, I still was very quiet with respect to, let's just say, decisions. And I was still inquiring and learning and embracing. And I'd say it really wasn't until about 2 years that I started to say, I have some ideas that I'd like to help this fabulous organization. You need to understand that when you come into a firm like Crowe with that incredible history and an amazing culture and that unbelievable alumni, I think a reasonable person would say, my job is not to screw this up. Right. As opposed to, I'm going to come in here and put my imprimatur.
Sure.
And I had seen on Wall Street in 25 years so many leadership changes where doesn't matter what the new person comes in, and immediately, the old person was bad, and I got all the ideas, and
I can solve it all.
90 days, here's my plan, and let me rough up the organization. And the chaos and unnecessary damage that is done in that type of behavior, that behavior is necessary when a company's in free fall.
Yeah.
It has a real strategic problem. But if a company's well run, even if you have good ideas, right? You need to be very thoughtful and careful with respect to the implementation of those if you're smart. And I had learned that lesson. I learned that lesson myself and in some of the roles I had at Morgan Stanley about the
Right.
pressures I had from above to make change.
Right.
So, there was no answer to your question. It was not like there was strategic plan A, and after 2 years, it became strategic plan B. It was identifying, I think that I can add value by adding this element to the company over here that takes all these good things that it has and builds on it, as opposed to I want to change or reduce what we do today. And that's really, we've spent the past 5+ years, that's what we've done.
So where are we today? I mean, tell me about y'all's latest fund and kind of where you are in that deployment cycle and how it's grown a little bit.
My lawyers won't let me talk about funds or returns, so but I say that in jest. If you step back at our firm, it's pretty simple to understand, even from the outside. We are a real estate, whatever order you want to put it in, we are a real estate development and investment firm.
Mm-hmm.
Within that, we have 2 divisions.
Yep.
We have a real estate development company and we have a real estate investment management company.
Yep.
They're led by 2 completely different teams.
Yep.
Our real estate development company is in 20 offices across the country. We have folks on the ground. We self-perform in a lot of our stuff. So we have great construction teams and capabilities. It's technically headquartered in Dallas, but it's a spread out business across the United States. And our people in that business really know how to build things. And their skills and talents are the multiplicity of skills and talents to build things.
Yeah.
The real estate investment management business and team is largely, with some exceptions, all in Dallas, Texas.
Yep.
Incredibly talented people, including people who have deep real estate background, as well as people who have financial backgrounds and the blend of those 2 things. So that's where we're at. You asked, where are we at today? Talk about your most recent fund.
Sure.
It's in the context of that. The real estate investment management business has a range of capabilities. It has and its historical capability that the market knows best is the value add capability, which is in a value-add fund. And this is all public. We raised a fund that recently closed. The fund was $3.1 billion, and there was dedicated co-investments from investors of $600 or $700 million. But we also have a capability in the secondary space and the credit space and the core plus space. And we have a terrific small retail team and capability. And so the company today has expanded its capabilities in addition to this amazing franchise and track record in the value add space. The business has expanded into these other areas. And alongside of that, our investors, our partners have expanded globally with us to be able to pursue all of this.
Yep.
The real estate development business has also grown.
What fund was this, by the way? Is this 9?
This is Value Add Fund 10.
10.
This was Fund 10. So we've been doing this, and the team led by Bob McLean. Bob's been there for the beginning. They've done an amazing. They do an amazing job, and long-standing track record and great consistency, and really terrific. And our investment partners couldn't be more fabulous in supporting what we do and helping us grow and create opportunity for them and for us.
You've obviously done a good job, or it wouldn't continue to grow.
Yeah. Isn't that always the canary in the coal mine?
It really is.
Investors don't support you. It's telling you something about things.
Where do you see opportunity today?
I would say to you, there's tactical opportunities, and then there's secular opportunities. And I think a lot of it depends upon your duration or or where you're at. I guess I would say 3. Let me talk more tactically for the moment. Tactically,
for sure.
I think right now, if you're investing $1 in the real estate space, the things that I find personally more attractive is, one, I do think this credit mezzanine lending, bridge financing space is really interesting right now. The lack of liquidity in the markets, the banking sector pulling back, the high interest rates.
Right.
A few years ago, it was great to be a borrower. and it was not great to be a lender.
Right.
Well, you know what? Today, it's great to be a lender and it's tougher to be a borrower.
Right.
And so I think that the ability to provide liquidity, to the marketplace and have that, the types of risk-adjusted returns.
Yep.
But the duration is relatively short on that investment.
Right.
So, I think it's a terrific investment opportunity. But again, it goes back to duration. I'd say that is probably the more prolific opportunity in the marketplace.
Yep.
The second area is also related to liquidity. And I would call that, for lack of a better word, entity level or recapitalization financing mechanisms. Think about it. There are, operators, developers, fund managers who are growing or have needs and they need capital. And they used to be able to meet those needs by selling assets or borrowing and those mechanisms. And so the ability to provide capital in a flexible format that allows someone to meet 3 or 4 or 5 pockets of needs to help them grow their business. Right. It's really growth capital, not distress capital.
Right.
Related to that, there might be ventures or funds that are, some investors want to get out, some investors want to stay in. Someone needs liquidity to deal with these complex situations during a liquidity-starved period of time. And so those are more complex than a straight-up property mezz loan, for example.
Sure.
The structural complexities are compounded, but the market needs it. And so, and that obviously, if you form a great partnership with that operator, developer, fund manager, in the years ahead, as there are growth opportunities, you're going to have a very special relationship with them, securing future opportunities.
Right.
So that's been a great area of focus.
Yep.
I think as you move to secular, think about things without the capital structure, but think about things in terms of the long-term supply-demand fundamentals in the United States. Right. I could talk about the things that we all talk about, like workforce housing, attainable living, residential rental, and we can spend time on that. Or we can talk about industrial, which is both you and I, we will. And I could talk about that, but since everybody spends more time in that, an area within attainable housing that we have built a terrific franchise on is the manufactured housing space. So 1 of 9 homes built in the United States per year is constructed in a factory as a manufactured home.
Interesting.
1 in 9 built.
1 in 9.
Now that doesn't mean every one of those goes into a purpose community, but 1 in 9 homes are a manufactured home. In America, there are 43,000 manufactured home communities, right? With about 4.3 million homes on them, which multiple people live in these homes. So you're talking about, a large swath. The cost of these homes in many markets is a third or a quarter of the cost of a traditional home.
Right.
And this is really important to America. When we talk about, we want to help the attainable housing in America, there's no segment that's more attainable housing than manufactured housing across the country.
Right.
But the dynamic with manufactured housing is it is difficult to get entitlements to build new communities. The tax base is low. There's a stigma around the space.
That's right.
And so instead of there being net new supply, there's net negative supply every year as communities get redeveloped for higher and better uses. And fewer manufactured home communities are built. Do you know any other segment of real estate where there's net negative supply every year in a segment that has this much demand? I'm not even sure there's a segment that has net negative new supply.
The last thing you said, this much demand.
Yeah.
Right.
So that fundamental is terrific. And then when you think about the investment opportunity, one level deeper, when you are acquiring a manufactured housing community, you are not acquiring the homes.
Right.
The individuals own their homes. They have brought their home onto your property and they're renting the site and the utilities and access to the common amenities from you. So as an investor, your ongoing CapEx needs, right, and the volatility of your cash flows is fairly limited because you don't have that exposure. The really fun part of it is there's a lot of these communities that have been owned by individuals for long periods of time, 20, 30, 40 years, who have, in so many instances, it's a highly fragmented industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 85+% is owned by mom and
pops. Yeah.
And so many of them have just not reinvested back in the properties. And so you drive up and the landscaping looks poor, and the clubhouse that was built 30 years ago doesn't look very good. And the pool, instead of being clear,
shuffleboard court's not in good shape. Yeah.
The pool's brown, not clear, you know.
Right.
And so you can go in and you can, at a relatively reasonable cost, you can make the place look terrific. And you know what happens when you make it look terrific? The value of the homeowners' homes goes up.
Sure.
And it's often usually their single most important asset.
Yep.
So you have this incredibly virtuous circle where you can come in as a new institutional owner and really make the place look great. And also maybe basics like just paying rent online, you know, things like that. Yeah. And we think it's just a terrific business, and we've been at it for a number of years. And from a secular perspective, that would be the one thing, you know, in addition to, you know, the big things like, you know, industrial that we can talk about.
For sure. What areas of the country do you want to invest in? Or do you have strategic areas where you want to be?
Sure. Look, across the United States, there are demand-driven markets and there are supply-constrained markets. Yep. Now, there are also supply-constrained markets that are declining demand. So, and so, you know, you can just look at the data where it's really hard to build, right? It might not be growing populations, but it's, you know, really hard to build. So, in general, we're much more focused on the markets where people are moving to.
Yeah.
You know, you can't guess interest rates. You don't know where they're going to go. You don't know where the stock market's going to go. You don't know where GDP is going to go. You don't know these metrics. Anyone who claims they do is...
That is one of your pet peeves.
It is one of my pet peeves.
You hate guys that try to make predictions.
These forecasts, God, they're so wrong. But, so what can you hang your hat on? Right. What is it that
population growth.
You can see America moving. You can, and you it's clear these trends, and you know why these trends. You know why people are moving, where they're moving to. You can predict it with much greater degrees of accuracy.
Yep.
And so we fundamentally are very focused on the places where people are moving to. Where are people moving to? Largely speaking, the Sun Belt.
Yeah.
You know, largely speaking, the Southeast and the Southwest. So we have much more focus on that. That does not mean that we don't have activity as an investor developer in the Bay Area, in Seattle, in Boston.
Sure.
We have industrial in Chicago. So I don't mean to say that there is an opportunity across the United States, but in the aggregate, now we come in America from Dallas on out. You know, this is our neighborhood. This is our backyard. And if the real estate business, if relationships matter, which they do, and getting the first call, the last look, and the benefit of the doubt, the trust and goodwill that we've built up, you know, in our backyard over 75 years is a competitive edge for the company.
Have you seen a massive, talk about where the capital comes from. And I've got to imagine that over time, everybody wants to be in Texas now, right?
473,000 people are here year over year.
You know, but you as a guy who grew up in New York City, you know, you think New York City is the capital of the world.
Oh, sure.
Right? Sure. And you obviously spent your entire career till you moved here 7 years ago in that environment. How has your thought process of like, where does Dallas fit in the equation changed? I mean,
how my views have been expanded, improved, you know, and how much better American and human I am by having this experience. So I'll tell you where I started from 8 years ago. So I decide to leave my firm after 18 years. So I go in to resign to my boss. And he was very surprised, obviously. But in the middle of the conversation, he starts looking down and he's fumbling with his phone. I was like, wow, that's kind of rude. Like we're in the middle of this, you know, pretty emotional.
This is a big day. Been here 18 years, bro.
And he takes his phone out and he turns it around. He shows me a weather app where it's like, it was July. It's like 104 degrees. He's like, you're out of your mind. You're going where to do what? And I think a lot of my friends and people that I knew were like, "You're
What are you
leaving
doing
this for that and there."
Right.
From the moment I came here, it was fabulous. From the moment I hit the ground in Dallas, everything that everybody knows, my God, how welcoming the people are. You know, the hospitality.
The business community here is unbelievable, isn't it?
It's so well. People want you.
They want everybody to succeed.
Literally inviting you in, inviting you to their homes. Genuine, not what can this guy do for me? Like genuinely, how do I help? And I learned that on the line to get my license at the Department of Motor Vehicles. You just saw it in the water and the culture of the community, and then the day-to-day grind here. The day-to-day grind in New York is awful. Yes. Getting in and out of that city from the suburbs, getting around, living your life. It is, as the years go by, it wears on you.
It wears.
You come to Dallas, if you choose, you can be 20 minutes from anything you want. And if you choose to live way up north and have a job, way down south, that choice is on you, but you don't need to do that to have a nice house and a nice neighborhood. And so the daily grind is phenomenal. And the business environment also in terms of the regulatory construct, the just government generally wants to see you succeed. They don't want to stand in the way of your ambition. Think about some of the things that have happened in a place like New York years ago with AOC and Amazon. I mean, these are very telling cultural things. And you come to Dallas and you have support in what you're doing. And so when you look at that, I mean, I picked up literally 3 hours a day because I didn't have to commute from the suburbs into Manhattan. And then this wonderful airport called DFW that you can travel anywhere in the world or anywhere in the country. So those are all the things that I saw immediately. And so I had a love affair with here. And finally, 8 years in, and less than 8 years in, more and more friends are coming down, more and more of their kids are going to SMU, more and more of their businesses are open up. And they're like, oh, this place is great. And you're like,
we get it.
I've been telling you that.
Right. It's wild.
It's great. Yeah. I love this place.
That's great to hear. It's just wonderful to be in an environment where, and we talked about the business culture here, where like, I don't think people are jealous here. They actually want to help others, right? Like if you're winning, the guy sitting next to you is winning. And the amount of doors that can open up for people here are just, it's unreal. It's unlike anywhere. And I even compare that to like even down in Austin and Houston. I just feel like the business community, especially in the real estate sector here in Dallas, is unlike anywhere else.
Yeah. No, it's a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And it's a mindset of plenty and opportunity and friendly competition and wonderful sharing. It's also for such a big, metropolis. It's a small town in a big city in that respect. It's very easy to get to know people and then to get to know you.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of exposure to different deals over your career. What would you say is your most memorable deal to date? Like
in my life?
In your life.
There was a period of time. I mean, it was more than a deal. It was a series of deals. It was 2007. Late 2000, let's just call it 2000, late 6 through 08. And while I was in investment banking before I went to investment management, that was the beginning of the end, right? For the financial industry. And I got an assignment to work for one of the largest pension funds in the world, who was a huge owner of residential real estate across the United States. And residential, remember, that was the beginning, that was the tip of the iceberg when it all fell over. And I got the assignment to work with them to restructure their entire, real estate portfolio, focused primarily on their residential real estate and urban development. Literally tens of billions of dollars of assets. And all of a sudden, it was restructuring, bankruptcies, all of these very complicated things that had not happened in my career.
Right.
Remember, 94 to 07, there really was no downturns to speak of. And what I learned and the experiences that I had, and then unfortunately the firm I worked for, Morgan Stanley, had its own, huge meltdown in 08, 09. And then I got to take all the skills I developed working for clients now back to the firm. And so I worked for the firm in restructuring, lots of, real estate. That whole period of time of restructuring and the human drama that goes with it, the investor drama that goes with it, the technical drama that goes with it, all of that was the most incredible training ground that I had ever had.
The best reps you ever got.
Without a doubt. No doubt about it. I mean, it's fun early, like when I was working on IPOs right out of school during that REIT boom, 94, 95, like the chops I developed fast. It was great. I mean, in just a couple of years, you're like, wow, I got some skills now.
Yeah.
That was a formative period. But this period of time of restructuring and recaps and bankruptcies, being an advisor or not being the guy who actually created the problem. Remember? Like, I didn't have that. Just an amazing period of time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was.
And I know you hate predictions, but you talk to so many people that are on Wall Street, investors everywhere, where are we in the economic cycle right now? Where do you see 24, 25? What do you see on the horizon?
Okay. I will answer your question because we all have to have a baseline, right?
Sure.
Every one of us, notwithstanding my point, right? And you know me too well. I'll make a macro point. Look, we've had enough cycles in modern commerce to understand that these things never go on forever. Right? They never take 6 months. And with the rarest of exception, they never last 6 years. So that these periods of time, generally take a few years to work through the excesses that get built up. I say that also acknowledging that it is true that it became crystal clear in January of 22 that something was wrong. Right. Even though Jay Powell said in December of 21, we have transitory inflation, the market started screaming at you in January 22. Right. We're 2.5 years into this at this point in time. Okay. The federal government, everybody focuses on the Fed and raising interest rates so high and so fast, restrictive monetary policy. At the same time, the federal government has been stimulating the economy with $2 trillion deficits and treasury activities, right? That are pushing on the economy. And so you've had one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake. But the gas has been on this entire time. Stimulating demand, driving inflation, driving interest rates. Obviously, we have an election coming up and federal policy. And it is certainly possible that Congress and the next president, decides I'll run $2 trillion deficits forever until, the markets tell them no more.
Right.
But my sense is that stimulation will begin to decline next year. And COVID related and CHIPS Act and other things will begin to decline on a relative basis. And that'll take a little bit of the heat out of the system, which will begin to produce the fodder to see some decline in interest rates. And there might be other elements. The economy might be slowing down at the same time, but let's talk about kind of real estate. And the thing that's hurting us all right now is these interest rates, other than the office sector, which we can talk about. And so I look at that, declining interest rate environment as we, begin to, I don't know what month, but let's just call it by this time next year. And coupled with, for certain asset classes, new starts have collapsed for a lot of things. They collapsed quickly for industrial, and industrial is such a short time period to build, and they collapsed later. It was surprising that new starts for multifamily didn't collapse quickly. It took they kept going through July of 23. But that means, look, new deliveries for industrial in 25 is going to start to decline. So the supply-demand fundamentals underneath that sector. And for multifamily, let's call it a year later. And so, as an investor, you think about that, in these cycles. So that may not have been as a direct answer to, but it's the way I think. It's my baseline as to how I approach risk and opportunity in the marketplace. So, and we tactically invest, reflecting those views today.
No, that's good. Let's shift a little, and I'd love you to just talk a little bit about what advice would you give young kids today getting into this business?
Of course, getting older and older and older, and having the seat I do, I get asked this all the time.
Yeah.
And, I always have to be careful because I know what worked for me.
Sure.
Right. And I think I have some truisms that most people say, but the truth is, we're each individual and our careers have developed in our own ways.
No doubt.
And some of it's just, mom and apple pie. I don't know the substitute for really hard work. And I don't mean a little hard work. I mean sacrificial hard work. And it depends on what you want out of your life and your career. So
this is true.
Right. And what your interests are. But if you spoke to a young person who said, I want to be, whatever, the next head of the largest real estate private equity firm, that's what I'm shooting for. That's what I want. I want that job, I'd say, okay, well, you recognize first that you're going to have to sacrifice large parts of your personal life relative to what your expectations of your friends might be. And so that hard work is critical. And I just don't mean, leaving the office at 8:00, right?
Yeah.
I mean, periods of time in your life where you're 24/7 and, and that is something that's easy for people to say. The question is, can you do it? And will you want to do it?
Yeah.
The second thing is, treat everybody around you with dignity and respect. From the person that you don't think is relevant, in your organization or in the building, to the most senior person. The world is round, your career is long, your reputation will follow you, and it gets built. Some of my best friends in the business today are the people I work closely with 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And you never know. So, get your emotions in check, right? Don't, be a jerk. Don't lose your cool. Just treat people with dignity and respect around you. It's really
great
important.
Advice. That's really good.
The third is
just in life.
Just in life. That is not just business. You just do that in life.
Right.
It pays huge dividends.
For sure.
Obviously, it goes without saying, but your ethical compass. Just whether no one's watching or everyone's watching. We all make mistakes. Everyone. Lapses in judgment. But or it's my behavior, my actions. If it winds up on this is an old statement, the front page of the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever, how will I feel about that? And I think ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
And that, that's so generic, right? The advice I just gave is generic, but you know what? It is without a doubt,
it's true.
The most important hallmarks. Some of the things that you might not have as much control over. And I think you can see this in every industry, whether it's the computer industry.
Yep.
These reps that you get when you're young, 22, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yep.
If you're at a shop or a firm that's got a lot of flow and activity and your technical skills, right? That get the thousands of hours so that it becomes intuitive to you, right? The compounding benefits of that over time, right?
Yep.
If you don't get that when you're young, it's really hard
for sure
to get that later in life. And so these are if you don't want to really work really hard when you're young and you don't want to do these things when you're young, it's hard.
Yeah.
Not impossible.
But it's hard.
But it's hard.
That's right.
To do it in the next chapter of your life. So try and be thoughtful about the firm you're joining and whether or not it's got enough transaction activity and flow that you'll really get worked hard and you'll get reps. You'll have lots of closings or whatever elements of the business. I've seen that to be hugely critical in the ultimate success of people's careers. I mean, again, that's my experience, right? But I've seen it in lots of people's experience. Sure. And you can't always control that, but try and put yourself, be tenacious. And,
that's right.
And do the best you can.
Amen. Let's jump into what I call the C-suite closers, which are just quick kind of hit questions, short answers, but just so that the people get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
What?
They didn't get enough out of this? No.
Well, they got a lot out of this. But What is something that people don't know about Michael Levy?
There is a kind of an adventure side of me in terms of on a personal level that has kind of metastasized itself. And I like to drive cars on the track.
Yep.
I used to like to drive motorcycles a lot, but I saw too much stuff and I switched that over, and I enjoy the track a lot.
Okay. Yep.
I've recently done some paragliding. My
Really?
wife is thrilled about, and I think we're gonna go on a journey to really learn that
That's
sport.
neat.
And I never thought, I always liked things that went fast on the ground. I didn't realize that I was okay with things that were above the ground. But
how is that feeling of paragliding?
it's really neat. So you're well, the way I've done it is you kind of run off the mountains.
Okay.
And, the first thing is that you're like Fred Flintstone. Your feet are moving, but there's no jarring. It's not like you lift it up or you're jarred. It's almost like motionless. You were running, and then the next thing you're running, but you're Fred Flintstone and your feet.
Yeah, right.
And then you're kind of floating. So it's serene. It's calm. It's
right.
Now you can pull one side or the other and cause it to spin downwards and get vertigo if you want. But the coolest thing about it is, so you're slowly floating and you're floating over the valley. You can then pull the paraglide closer to the mountain and catch the thermal drafts up, and it pulls you back up. And what people may not realize is you could, in the right environment, spend the entire day up there, and you can travel dozens of miles if you're in the right mountain range, just floating all day, going down and then going back up on the thermal drafts. And so it's and therefore you imagine spending all day up there. It's obviously not doesn't have to be that taxing for your body to handle it. And it's just
was there
sight.
When you jump off the first time, how does the stomach feel?
It really didn't
get you.
No,
nothing.
I mean, of course, a little bit,
bit,
but yeah, of course, but not.
That's interesting.
These.
So you love it. It's just
it was really neat. My wife and our we have a place in the Alps, which is where we learned, and she did it first, and I was like, well, she loved it, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I think this summer we're gonna spend more. Right? We're absolute beginners, and so we have a guide that's strapped on, but I think our goal is to learn how to do it solo this year.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Most impactful book?
Nonfiction and fiction. Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, without a doubt, as a college student, reshaped the way that I thought about the world and thought about human behavior, and impacts me to this day. In terms of a book that moved me, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy was the most vivid imagery that I've ever had in a book. It impacted me from how a writer could impact my soul.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great. I actually just bought War and Peace to read.
Really?
And I'm going to tackle this summer. So
maybe on the flight over to across the pond.
I think I'll need more than one flight.
So. How many pages is it?
Oh, I think 1,100.
100? Yeah, something crazy. Yeah. What does your morning routine look like every day?
I try to wake up early at 5:30 and go to the gym, or if I'm not up for the gym, go for a walk or something. And I try to do that 4 days a week. I have a ridiculous travel schedule, which does not help routines.
Right.
On the days that I don't do that, I still get up pretty early. I go to bed pretty early. So I'm, sleeping in for me would be 7.
Right.
Sleeping in.
Yeah.
More. It's still like 5:30, give or take.
Yeah, sure.
And in the mornings where I don't go to the gym, I'll spend an hour and a half just meandering in my thoughts, writing my ideas down. I try not to get consumed by emails. I do not. I mean, I know I responded to your LinkedIn, but I don't really spend any time on LinkedIn. I have no other social media. I have nothing else. I do not have news apps. I try my best to stay away from the news almost in its entirety. So,
well, it's all woke now, anyhow.
Yeah. And so I kind of meander a little bit in my thoughts, and then I start writing ideas down and thinking about,
great.
my work and maybe checking my to-do lists. And then I get on the road and start moving, man.
Do you have any podcasts that you listen to or?
Yeah, that's so, what do I listen to a lot of? I like, if I like smart comedy, I like Bill Maher a lot.
Yeah,
I think he's really smart. He is really interesting. He's got a couple different podcasts. I like his style and his humor and his intelligence.
Yes.
There's a thinker, a guy named Sam Harris, that is
Sam Harris. Okay.
What an unbelievable thinker and ability to articulate ideas and thoughts. He's a neuroscientist. He's fascinating.
All right.
Fascinating guy. There are probably 10 or 15 others that I listen to.
But those are the ones that come to mind.
Like those are the ones that I spend them. Those are my go-to ones, and then there are others that I enjoy.
On the Spotify playlist, what are the top 3 bands that you got on that Spotify playlist of yours?
Depends on what. I have a very eclectic choice in music. I will. There. When I'm in a mood, I have moods. I want to listen to opera and Andrea Bocelli, and it moves my soul in a beautiful way. I used to be a huge Southern rock fan growing up as a teenager. So Marshall Tucker and the Outlaws, and Molly Hatchet, and they can move my soul. My kids have really gotten me into some of the more modern pop. So I think Dua Lipa's phenomenal, and Ed Sheeran's such a talent, and
so talented.
So there are days and environments where I want that vibe. There's I can get into disco from the 70s. I can. Michael Jackson and Donna Summer.
Yeah,
so it really depends upon.
Yeah.
Or I was just listening to Chopin's Etudes, and and I played the piano, so it interests me. So there's no one. Yeah. There's no one.
I'm gonna have to work on getting some country into your rotation.
Oh, I do. Actually, I learned. That's one thing. No, I did not listen to country at all. I apologize.
Growing up. No.
Oh no, and why would I listen to country?
Yeah, true.
And I moved to Dallas. I love country.
Yeah.
And and people who've bridged it, like a Zach Brown. Who's,
for sure.
Or Darius Rucker.
Right.
And more traditional country, but Zach.
That's good.
That Zach Brown band. When you see them live,
right?
Not only do they sing their songs, they do these amazing cover songs. They're so talented.
Do you own a Stetson hat yet?
I do own a Stetson.
Do you
hat.
really?
Yes, I do. When I came down, not long after I came down, let's just call it the people at my company decided they were going to dress me up as Woody from Toy Story. And I had the chaps, and I had to buy a hat and a belt buckle and a vest.
That is so great.
So I have a Stetson hat from being Woody that I've never worn again, but I've got it in my office.
That's so great. If you could have coffee with one historical figure of all time, who would it be?
Well, it would. I want to pick 2 because I think they're fascinating.
You can go to 2.
I want to have coffee with Plato and Aristotle.
Wow.
Because it is shocking how much at that moment in civilized history, let's call civilization, has 5,000 years of recorded history. In that 150-year period, that 3rd and 4th century BC, how much those Greeks figured it all out.
Right.
It is truly unbelievable what that period of time and what, Socrates leading into Plato and Aristotle, the profound impact that just a couple of thinkers had on humanity for thousands of years.
Yeah.
I would just...
Yeah, you would eat that up.
I would love that. It's interesting now with it's like what we do in society. People look at some of the other behaviors of the Greeks and like, oh, they were wrong in this and wrong in that, or they guessed this wrong. It's like, no. But look at all the amazing stuff that they figured out that to this day is true.
Still, utilizing.
So that's
awesome. If you could live anywhere in the world besides lovely Dallas, Texas, or New York, where would it be?
In the United States?
No, anywhere in the world.
Well, I want to live in the United States. Okay. I've traveled the world at great length, and there are wonderful places, and and I know we have our problems and our challenges, and I know but there's no country in the world to me, and maybe because it's home, but that has the things that this great country has, and the people and the beauty and the splendor and the opportunity. So it would be the United States. I I like my life at this point in time. I still have a deep New York life. You know, my family home, and my two older kids live there, and all my best friends I grew up with.
Yeah, sure.
You know, family. So, you know, I think when you talk about living anywhere in the country, you know, home is where your heart is, and your heart is around the people that you. I hope it's around the people that you love.
Sure.
And so I really like the Dallas, New York thing. You know, when I retire, whenever that day comes, I got 3 kids, and if they all live in one place, you know where I'm living? I'm living with my kids. If they live in 3 wildly different places, well, then I'll pick one of them.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately where I'm going to drive. If you said to me, like, not live, but like one country other than the U.S. that you want to spend a lot of time in, it's Italy, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to live there. I think it's, you know, difficult to get stuff done. My goodness, that is a great country to spend time in.
Yeah. Decent food.
Yeah, let's just call it pretty decent. You know, better Italian food than you can get in Dallas.
Yeah, for sure. What is, last few things here, favorite thing about Dallas? That could be a restaurant. That could be a spot.
Yeah.
I mean, anything.
The daily grind.
Yeah.
The totality of the daily, where 80% of your life is spent, right?
Yeah.
Really think about your life. And it's the daily grind. This daily grind is just phenomenal. I literally am 15 minutes. I'm 0.85 miles from my office. I'm 10 minutes from any restaurant that I really want. If I, you know, want to do some sports of any kind, I'm 15 minutes from the tennis courts that I want to go to, or a golf course.
Right.
Like, that is phenomenal. I love that about Dallas.
What's the one thing you haven't found in Dallas that you miss from New York?
I really, you know, some of the ethnic cuisines that you get in New York, particularly those from European immigrant families. And so you come to this Metroplex, and I have yet to find a Greek restaurant, like really great. Like I just hasn't found it. And in Italian, it's tough. I mean, we can all talk about a few places, and Carbone came down, but it's not the same. It's just not. And and it's just what I grew up with. So I yearn for it.
Have you found a Cat's Deli replacement at all?
No, I haven't. Those two, you know, the bagel shops, the delis, those are all. I just say that
you traded it for barbecue, though.
But I don't eat meat.
Well, that's right. That's right.
I'm not a vegetarian. I eat birds and fish, but I don't eat meat.
That's right.
So it doesn't do much for me. And, you know, I'm still trying to figure out this word Tex-Mex, because I'm like, I'm in New York, and there are lots of Mexican restaurants, and the people who run them and own them are Mexicans. And their menus look a
lot different.
No, actually,
are they similar?
It's like the same items on the menus here I can get there. So I'm not saying that Mexican food in Dallas isn't better. I'm just like, it's not that new to me versus barbecue, which clearly you just don't have much of that up there.
Sure. I like to close with my whole mantra in life is, how are you impacting others? And you do a lot in the business world, but I'd love you to talk about some of the kind of charity and give back things that like you're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it's evolved over time. There are 2 things that are at least intellectual. Let me step back. I have been blessed that me and my closest family members have not suffered from disease and illness, and the things that so many of my friends have transformed their lives in terms of their giving and their and I support lots of things at a let's just call it a smaller level, because I care, and I care about friends, and I care. So I want to share that. If I had something, might be different, and therefore my giving is a little bit more just call it intellectual, more on the mind versus the heart. But the charitable causes I give to, one is you know, related to, I'm not going to say politics for politics, but you know, the policy and how the systems work, you know, the United States government, and everybody crazy, politicians are all corrupt, and it's all the same, and it's all like, if this system doesn't work, right? It's like the jury system. Nobody wants to serve in jury. Great. Okay. If we don't have a jury system with good jurors, like, that is the fundamental hallmark to justice in our country. Like, you should want to help and participate in that. And it's the same thing with our policy and political system. And so whether it's think tanks, right, or other organizations, it's really important. And I view that as, in my own view, as a huge act of giving. Yeah. I'm certainly not, getting a pecuniary item, and it doesn't benefit me other than the context of me being an American. Yeah. And I just think it's so important. Like, we take this, I think so many people take democracy and freedom for granted. It is not free, and it is not. And the system has to work. And I think people are seeing it now, like, this is scary. And it's like, so let's join together and help improve this thing.
Right.
The other thing that's been very important to me whole life growing up, my grandmother and grandfather emigrated out of Russia out of a pogrom and came into this country persecuted and with nothing, and were, their whole lives were to create a family and security and a Jewish family and the state of Israel and particularly what's going on right now. But it absorbs a huge amount of my time and energy and love and financial commitments, a variety of, whether it's pure charity across the world for people who are poor, or whether it's dealing directly in Israel with some of the challenges that people are having. That is just very important to me.
Yeah.
So,
Michael Levy, it's been great having you on today, bud.
My friend, it's always a pleasure spending time with you, and thanks for making this just an easy chat.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll do it again sometime again.
All right, pal.
All right, buddy.
Thanks.
See you, man.
Take care. Be well.